Welcome to the second Josh Calloway podcast. My name is Josh Calloway. I am the state representative in the 10th District of Kentucky, and I'm honored to be with you tonight, just trying to get information out to people. And I've got my good friend, Mr. Aaron Wells, with us here again tonight.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good deal. Did you have a good day?
Yeah, it was all right. It's a little busy.
A little busy? I knew it was busy. We were both running, trying to make it here on time.
Yeah.
And our good friend Kyle was working on trying to get things set up. He was running behind too, so
Well,
we made it.
You know, kind of professional sitting in here, you know?
I know it. I know it's a little better than the last one we did, sitting in those chairs in my office. So I appreciate him allowing us to use his studio, and I look forward to continue doing these and try to be as informational as we can to people, talk about what's going on in Kentucky and even in the United States of America, and try to be informative while at the same time be personal about what's going on in my life and in my district, and hopefully we have some good discussion that can help people. So.
Definitely a busy time. So
Yes, it is. There's a lot going on in the state of Kentucky right now, a lot going on in the U.S., but I guess the primary thing that's been on my mind in the last little bit is our May primary that's coming up May the 16th on next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we're 1 week away from having a challenger to Andy Beshear, so I'm excited about that.
Well, we should have a good one, hopefully. So but it's kind of heated up even on the national level. I think maybe Ted Cruz came out in support of one of the candidates. Is that correct this week?
I think he did. I think I read that he was coming to Louisville this weekend to actually, I think it's Louisville on Saturday, maybe to campaign with her.
Oh, wow.
I think Vivek Ramaswamy maybe came out and supported one of them this week.
Who did he endorse?
Kelly Craft.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so it's kind of interesting when you think about the front runners that are out there, you know, as far as the last polling that came out, the Emerson poll had Daniel Cameron at the top, and then Kelly Craft was down like 6 points, and I think down below that was Ryan Quarles, and then Eric Dieters from Northern Kentucky, and then, you know, kind of on down from that.
Right.
But that did set up some things in regard to fundraising and those polls for some of the debates that have been going on.
Oh, okay, so they had the first debate was with Matt Jones, right?
Yes.
Your good friend, Matt Jones. And
yeah, he's definitely not been my fan, but it's okay.
And then the last one was on KET, correct?
They actually did one the other night that Fox 56 out of Louisville put on, that they did Transylvania University. They actually Cameron and Kraft didn't come to that one, so it was Mike Harmon, Ryan Quarles, and Eric Dieters. Okay. And so it was interesting. I watched it. I've tried to stay informed. I will tell people, please don't call me and ask me who I'm voting for in this primary in the governor's race. You know, this has been an interesting race, the way it's shaped up. And I thought we can talk a little bit about it right now.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
So it's been interesting to watch how that it has shaped up. We have seen Ambassador Kraft has gained some ground in the polls by the way that she has campaigned. Right. It's kind of interesting because there were people that felt like that her messaging was off in regard to the commercials she was putting out. She definitely went after Daniel Cameron, and not just her. I mean, the PAC groups get engaged and involved, and a lot of people don't understand kind of how that works. But there are these PAC groups that raise money, and they'll get behind a specific candidate, and a lot of times they'll launch an attack against the opponent of their candidate or the one that's closest to them, depending on what type of race it is. Right. And so a lot of times people automatically think that it's the other individual that is doing that, and it's not always the case.
Yes. Because they don't have to consult the campaign in order to launch the
They're actually not allowed to.
They're not allowed to.
That's right. Oh, so it's illegal if they conspire, consult with the campaign on how they spend their money.
So the teddy bear campaign, was that Kelly Craft, or was that
It wasn't. It was a PAC. It was a PAC group.
Because, see, you know, if you read about it on the national media or even at Courier Journal, there's just like, Kelly Craft attacks, you know, Daniel Cameron and calls him a establishment teddy bear.
Yeah. So all that's been going on. And I heard somebody say the other day, and even in one of the debates, it was brought up. I think Alan Keck, who's running the mayor from Somerset, about that people, when there's the going back and forth, that's what people don't like about politics, Right. And I understand what he's saying, because I know people do get tired. But this is one thing I think it is important. I think that you definitely have to contrast yourself. Yeah. And I don't think there's ever anything wrong with telling the truth.
Right. Yeah.
People need to be informed. They need to know who they're voting for and why. Yeah. And if there are things that nobody should ever be mad for somebody else exposing their own record.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so,
well, and the slogan, I mean, that's the most memorable part of this primary kind of advertisement season for most people, is the teddy bear sitting there, in the commercial. And but that's been a part of politics for hundreds of years. I mean, the William Henry Harrison had Tippecanoe and Tyler too, or whatever. Yeah. And we still remember that. It's like 200 years later, and the guy was literally in office for 9 days and died of pneumonia.
Yeah.
So we still remember his campaign slogan and that he died of pneumonia. Right. He didn't do anything of consequence in the presidency, but those things, and people get all over. I guess in the last election cycle, because Trump likes to give people nicknames.
Right.
But that's, one of the most memorable parts. It keeps people engaged, And I think the downfall for Trump, which we don't have to talk about that. I don't know why I'm going into this, but the downfall for Trump in the 2020 in a lot of ways is that he kept everybody engaged, and Biden's strategy was not to have anybody engaged. Right. And it all became about Trump.
Yeah.
And so people got super tired of it, but I think this campaign, then they've done a pretty good job of, Daniel was ahead, or Attorney General Cameron was ahead, like 20 something points in January. And then maybe this last one, he was ahead by 6. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big, which, in a primary election is not abnormal.
That's right. Yeah. And I think there's a couple things about this election that are important, because you want the best person for the job. Right. So that's important. But also, as a Republican, the best person to beat Andy Beshear.
Right.
And so when you're thinking about that, sometimes that's not always the same person.
Right. Yeah.
True, yeah. And I'm not saying that is or isn't the case in this, because I'm not going there.
Right.
But but I think it's important to think about the best person to beat him. And this is something I've said from the very beginning. I believe that it's going to take money and boldness to beat Andy Beshear.
Yeah, for sure.
The money thing is just a part of it. We've come to a place, it is unreal how much money has been spent in the last decade on elections. Like, America would no longer be in debt.
Right.
Not literally, but
pretty close. Yeah.
It would be, if we had that number on that, I don't have it in front of me, but unreal to know the last decade, and it continually becomes more and more. Because power is a valuable thing to people.
Yes. I read something today that, doesn't necessarily relate to this, but will in the future. And it was in 2020 that Mark Zuckerberg spent about $419 million, which is the same as the U.S. government spent on federal and state election security and the processes, And so it's like a per capita spending. So most of the time in cities, then they spend about $7 per capita on making sure the election runs smoothly, and about $4 per capita in rural areas. And Zuckerberg spent all of that money in Democrat areas to run up the vote in states. So Georgia, Wisconsin, all those battleground states. And so it ended up they were spending like $47 per capita in those states and $4 per capita in the rural areas.
Right.
That's going to be a big influence on elections, not just national elections. That was kind of a trial run for them. He has this a group, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but we can talk about that later. But he has this group that he is funding, and they basically go in and provide support for the election processes.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily say this is what we're going to do in deciding which ballots are valid. They might just help count the ballots,
right,
or they might set up the ballot boxes. in certain areas, or they might say, oh, we don't need security at this ballot box or whatever. And so they really have a massive influence on elections. And that's the first time that anybody's aware of that a private individual has really involved themselves in the election process. You know, that doesn't mean that he cheated or stole or anything like that, but he used legal loopholes to influence the election in a certain way.
And I think it's something that is important, that it's a concern of people. I've heard a lot of people that are very concerned that their vote doesn't count, that the ability for their vote to be stolen exists.
Right.
And in that, I'm afraid it's caused people to not want to engage in the process. And I try to keep encouraging people, you have to engage. The only way we will fix this is to continue to engage, to get good people to make good laws that make sure that our elections are secure. And with the advancement of technology, it's an ongoing process to make sure we block. And, you know, there's a lot of different ideas about that we can talk about sometime on here. My point is that on Tuesday people have to go engage,
and it's going to take money for whoever wins on Tuesday.
That's correct.
You know, we're hoping that a good, you know, Republican candidate that can beat Andy Beshear comes out, because it's very difficult. It's very difficult. The reason you're saying that they need money is because he has tons of media coverage. It's like air support in a military. I mean, he has all the air support.
The other interesting phenomenon to me has been what part in this that Eric Dieters will play. You know, because he has his base that he has built out there. And they're thinking right now that this could be an 18 to 20% max voter turnout.
Oh, wow.
If that's the case, one individual with a following, depending on who they pull voters from, could influence which direction that this election goes. I think it could very easily be very close. And it's going to be.
He could, even if he doesn't win, could end up deciding the election based on who votes for him.
Who that he pulls votes from. You know, Ryan Quarles is going to pull a lot of the rural vote of the farmers and things of that nature, where he's built a rapport over the last 8 years. And so these different candidates out there are pulling from different voter bases and groups. And if we have a low turnout,
it could be anybody's.
This could be anybody's race. And might have been a good time for you to run. You know,
If 2 votes would win, I might win.
There you go. You could probably get your wife and your 2 daughters.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I'm
they're
sure
not old enough yet.
But. I'm sure that's everybody's dream, is for some no-name to run to be against Andy Beshear. But I think that opens the door as well, possibly, for a candidate that is weak to get a late endorsement or an endorsement to switch. We've seen the influence that Trump can have on elections. If he were to kind of get a little skittish of Daniel Cameron, because, you know, he likes to back winners, you know. Then, and he were to pull his and support someone else or do something like that, it could totally make it a wild card who we have running against Andy Beshear.
You know? And there's several candidates out there running. We haven't named you know, near all of them. These have been the front runners. But when you think about all of them that are out there, even those little voter groups could influence if those people realized, hey, I'm not going to win this election, and they threw their support somewhere, what voter groups they were pulling. You know, it could, but I think the key is that people they engage in it. And so I'm looking forward to getting out and voting. And when we come out of this election, I'm looking forward to throwing all my support to make sure that Andy Beshear is a one-term governor, and that we get somebody there that has some boldness, that's willing to stand up for the people of Kentucky, work with the legislature, and be able to move this state forward. It'd be nice just to make laws and not get sued, you know. So that's where we've been. And you know, it's just interesting for a supermajority to have a Democrat as a governor. That's just interesting. And I represent Republicans and Democrats in the role that I have. That is my job. Every legislator represents everybody in the district. I think the key is that most districts elect somebody that as a whole represents their values and their principles. And so not having that at the state head as the executive branch, the CEO of Kentucky has really been a strange phenomenon to me, how that it came about and barely won 5,000 votes.
And to be honest, against a governor that in Matt Bevin that wasn't really that popular in certain sectors. He was kind of polarizing in certain with teachers and with different people like that. And as things have played out, and we can probably get into that at some point as well, as things have played out, then a lot of what he was trying to do would have actually saved a lot of teachers' jobs. And the teacher shortage that we're dealing with is a kind of a snowball effect of what had to happen in Andy Beshear's first few months in office, but he just used it to get elected. But not super popular governor. He barely beats him, and then he's used the governorship in ways that we really haven't ever seen in Kentucky. I mean, he has used the full power of the bureaucracy that's under him to do a lot of things behind the scenes that don't really get reported on.
That's exactly right. And even through all of COVID that happened, there was the 5 o'clock updates and the kindness that he tried to put forth and all of that in contrast with the people that lost their businesses and lost their jobs.
Exactly.
And, it's so much that if people just look back and see what really happened and how devastating he has been for Kentucky, there should be no way we don't have a Republican governor come November, and that, in my opinion.
That even that even had an influence kind of on this election, because I believe one of the candidates running for, is it state treasurer, Cooper Ryder, then his business, Andy Beshear, tried to shut it down.
That's correct.
Famously, I think, across the media. And he decided he's going to run for treasurer to make sure that he can't use that power of the Treasury against businesses.
Yes, sir. Yeah. That races. I mean, all these statewide races that are out there. So get informed, get engaged. Feel free to reach out to me. A lot of people have to ask my opinion. I really I don't mind to give my take on that, and so we'll be glad to share that with you. I do want to say one thing I think is interesting because this is constantly on my mind.
Right.
The young people, the youth of Kentucky.
Yeah.
And one thing that I have to say, just in regard to Ambassador Kraft, and I've had these discussions with several of the candidates running, but the interest that has been taken in what is going on in our school system. If you look at national numbers and even some of the state numbers that have come out, the teacher shortage is not only, people talk about teacher pay, but it's not only about pay. We have a major issue in regard, especially in our urban areas.
Yes.
We have issues with student behavior and from the top, this woke ideology that is being pushed down on people and almost required that you support and that you drive it. And if you don't, retribution that can come as a result of it. So we talked a little bit about that last week. This is what I find is interesting, is that for some reason, if the media doesn't say something is happening, it's not happening. That's the way that it works in our society. It's like the media can totally disregard something. In the debate the other night, the one that was held, I believe, on KET, something was brought up about CRT, and immediately the media person said, but that's not going on in the state of Kentucky. So it's almost as if they don't say it's going on, it's not going on.
And what evidence do they have? Have they actually done their job as a reporter and gone out and saying, hey, is this going on or not? They don't do that.
But this is what they're doing too. They're ignoring evidence that is being given. And I've given offers to some of them. I'll be glad to sit down and show you the evidence that is going on. I've done some looking. Some other groups that have reached out to me, and it is amazing the pornographic books that are in some of our public school libraries. And People say, well, it's not happening, or it's not happening in our school. But this is what I would say, is that there has been an agenda for decades to go after the minds of our children.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it is important that people understand that. And I said that, I believe, on the last podcast, the reason being, when we were discussing Senate Bill 150, the mind is the gateway to the heart.
Right.
God deals with the mind and the heart. That's how he works in the life of an individual.
Yes.
And there is an attack against our youth today.
Yeah.
When you look at 1 in 4 in our high schools identify as something other than
heterosexual. Yeah. Or what they call
1 in 4, 28%. Okay. Think about that. Think about what's going on in the minds of our young people. Where's this coming from?
Right.
And I think it's important that we recognize that. And there's so many things that is being done as an attack, from social media to news media, to education systems. All of these things have launched an attack for the minds of our kids.
Right.
And it is destroying their innocence, and it's destroying their ability to properly reason, and for God to move and to work in their heart as a result of that.
Yeah. I think that if you look back even, 15, I think it's even maybe 10 years ago, then the number of high schoolers that identified as LGBT or whatever is like 3%, something like that. And, the argument that the liberals like to make is, well, we've relaxed all of these, things that are suppressing or strangling their expression or whatever. And, but they're saying that all of those things are actually natural to them. And so because we're not repressing them anymore, then all of a sudden they're being able to express themselves. Yeah. But studies were done like with left-handed people. They used to not let people write with their left hand in school. Yeah. And the number jumped from 2% left-handed to 5%. We're talking about an 800% jump by percentage, if that's correct. Or if it's 3% to 28%, then that would be a 900% jump, almost 1,000% jump, 9 times the amount of people that just 10 years ago were identifying as these alternate, what we would call unbiblical lifestyles, things that are specifically said in Scripture, shall not inherit the kingdom of God. Right? If we can put it that clearly. Yeah. I did this thing with Chat GPT the other day, and we don't have to get into that either. But it specifically says in Scripture, if you ask Chat GPT, for instance, what does the phrase abusers of themselves with mankind, what is the ancient Greek word for that the Bible is translated from? And it'll tell you, and it means men who sleep with men, or same-sex people. Yeah. Specifically says they shall not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, 1 in 4 of our high school students are openly professing and participating in a lifestyle. It's not just limited to those 1 in 4.
Right.
But 1 in 4 that is specifically listed in Scripture as being under the judgment of God, as they shall not inherit the kingdom of God. And we wonder why, church attendance and all that has fallen. They say, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they say, well, church attendance has fallen and LGBTQ identification has risen at the same time. And they kept saying, but correlation doesn't mean causation.
Yeah.
And I was like, I understand the difference between correlation and causation. But when the Bible says they shall not inherit the kingdom of God, and then people are abandoning the churches and becoming more LGBTQ plus or whatever, more so than at any time in history, right, then we're seeing that those things are causing each other.
That's right.
Right? It's a snowballing effect. And it's not an accident that them taking prayer out of schools and hating anything to do with Christianity in schools has opened the door to allow these things to come in. If the Bible and prayer and these things are in schools, then it by not by osmosis, but by just being in the presence of these things keeps it in check. They have, the war started when they took all that out. Yeah. This was the plan all along.
That's exactly right. And even if you go back beyond that, I was listening to some things today Pete Hegseth did that Miseducation of America.
That's really good.
And that was written from the book and the gentleman that he wrote it with, The Battle for the American Mind, or The Battle for the Mind of an America. And one of the things that he brought out, I didn't realize this, but when they were working toward abolition of alcohol,
right,
they started in the schools
really
teaching it.
Huh.
And it took decades.
Yeah.
For those kids to grow up and to get into, to become voters,
right,
and to have the ability to influence policy in the United States of America. But it was a plan.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what we are seeing.
Right.
And I make no bones about the fact that I'm saved, born again believer, that I love God, and I'm never going to try to mask that for somebody that thinks that, well, we're infringing upon right is right, wrong is wrong.
Yes, right.
God lays that out in the Bible, and looking at the way that our nation was founded on those principles, and for 100 years there's been an onslaught or an attack on those principles.
Right.
So this past week, just looking in Hardin County, I have a portion of Hardin County, but in the high school or in the public school libraries there, books like Tricks by Ellen Hopkins, Triangles, All Boys Aren't Blue, Blankets, a book called Flamer, a book called Fun Home, a book called Sold that's in 3 middle schools. And just interesting to hear, when
this is Hardin County, your district.
Yes, sir.
Which typically is a super rural district.
And this is a content warning on the book.
Right.
You're about to access material that may contain content of an adult nature. These files may include pictures and materials that some viewers may find offensive. And then it has a warning on if you were under 18 years of age. And this book contains explicit, aberrant sexual activities, including the rape of a minor, prostitution, and explicit violence. I wouldn't even read the words that are in this. I have it for proof that it exists, but I mean, this is right here in our communities. These are things that our middle schoolers, our kids, are being exposed to.
Right. Here's like a scenario. So there's no parent with any kind of brain at all that would send their child over to the other street and a man meet that child out on the sidewalk and give them pornographic material and talk to them about pornographic material and explain sexual things to them. Nobody in their right mind would do that.
And it would be illegal for somebody to do that to a child.
Right. They would call it solicitation and things like it would be an absolute crime. But all of a sudden, inside of the walls of taxpayer-funded schools, right, that are supposed to be places that are a help to our society, that are supposed to teach children how to read and write and do all of these things. All of a sudden, you get inside the walls of those taxpayer-funded schools, and because we have a Democrat governor who controls or helps control the Board of Education or picks the Board of Education, then adults are allowed to come in, get a job, and teach children that. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, this is the thing, is that I am never, ever going to let up on this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I want to make clear. And I know I talk about it often, but I don't think there's anything more valuable than the minds of our children.
It's not. Yeah.
There's nothing more valuable.
Yeah.
And so I think every chance that we get to expose this stuff, encourage parents, look into what's going on.
Right.
Fight back against it. Find out what it is. In Senate Bill 5 that we passed this year lays out a process. It's not strong enough. I get it. I think we need to make it stronger. Yeah. But I think it's important for parents to know that it's going on, realize there's a very good chance it would be going on in your child's school or in their library, and go find out, seek it out, and make sure that that you're engaged in your child's education. You know what they're being exposed to. And the Breckinridge County Schools, I know a group looked into that. It appears as if that either they've never had this in or that they have cleared it all out, that it's not in, and that is great. It says a lot about our structure here, and so I applaud that.
Right.
But somebody's pushing this stuff.
Yes, that's exactly.
So somebody can say, I don't know it's there. I didn't know it was there in the school system, but somebody knows it's there.
Yes.
Somebody's allowed it.
Right.
And there's groups, I'm sure, that are trying to mass send these things in to get them into school systems.
Right.
But I think it's important that parents engage and fight against it, push against it. And if you're not making headway, reach out for help.
Yeah.
I will do everything within my power to help protect the minds of kids.
Yeah.
And so it's just amazing.
Could there be some kind of like, maybe, let's say, for instance, that a superintendent doesn't know that the book Genderqueer is in their school library, in their middle school library, which was the case in JCPS. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Was it middle school or high school?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. I saw a clip of it or something. But let's say that the superintendent doesn't know. Then that doesn't allow them to then tell everybody, well, you got to just trust me and we'll do what's right.
Yeah.
That's not a building block toward that. That's a building block toward saying, well, we can't trust you to oversee that if this is there.
Right.
It's like if you are in charge of a school and all of a sudden 15 grenades show up in the school library, and the superintendent's like, well, I didn't know those were there. Then people would be like, well, you should have known that they are there. Yeah. And so a book like this, which whenever I read some of the things about it and the things that it depicts, the first thought that came into my mind is, what kind of pedophile wrote this?
That's exactly right.
Like did he go in front of school boards and be like, here, I want to show children all about, all kinds of sexual experiences, and I want to draw it out for them. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, that's great. What was that meeting like? You know what I'm trying to say?
No, you're exactly right.
And so is there a way to maybe have parental oversight boards? And I know people will push back against that, but that's fine to push back against that if you're not allowing pornography into middle schools.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, and I've said it several times, I hate to beat a dead horse, but one of the great things about COVID was as parents got exposed to what their kids were being exposed to.
Yeah.
The same thing with CRT. Just the other day, Elizabeth TikTok tags curriculum out of Grayson County School.
Oh, my goodness.
That was asking CRT segregation type questions in a school book in Grayson County, Kentucky. Yeah. So I just think it's important that parents engage, and we will do everything we can at the legislative level to continue to just to make sure our kids' minds are protected. And I carried the school choice bill last year.
Yeah.
I intend to file it again next year.
Yeah.
School choice to me is not about public school versus private school, public school versus Christian school. School choice is about what's the best fit for a child.
Right.
Every school system needs to be clear and clean to keep a child's mind from being exposed to these types of things, from them being over-sexualized, from them, and that's a lot of, I believe, what this is about.
Yeah.
And there's no telling to where it leads. And when you talk about it, I get it, what people think, but I'm just telling you, it's a fact. They're after the minds of our kids. And I wanted to make sure we talked about it again tonight, that we expose it and let people know there is a process. Engage in it. Call me, text me, email me. There are other legislators that are willing to engage in this battle, and I think it's important that it stays in the forefront of our minds.
Right.
Then come November, we get a different governor. And we get somebody that will appoint people at the top to make sure that we just clean house in the entire state of Kentucky.
Yes. Yeah, that'll be good. I think, if you go back, you can look at World Health Organization guidance. I think it's 2002, maybe 2004, about how exposing children to sexual material, how it affects their mental health and how it actually affects their brain. And then you go to 2018 to World Health Organization guidelines, and all of a sudden it still says some of that stuff but it changes it to exploitation instead of material.
Yeah.
Right. And then it says that children of all ages should be free to, explore themselves and what they think and their gender identity and all of these things. That's the World Health Organization.
That's right.
That's funded mostly by the United States of America, but under the oversight of the United Nations.
Yeah.
That's countries all over the world have started pushing this.
That's right.
From 2010 was the beginning of their transition in that area. 2010, they started pushing these things, especially with children and young people. And now, I mean, it seems like that it is everywhere.
Yes.
The reason that I'm making this point is that people like the man at the KET debate, and a lot of people on the liberal side of the aisle, and even the Fairness Campaign, will say, well, that's not going on in schools. Why would you even assume that's going on in schools? Because it's going on from the top down and from the bottom up.
That's right.
And so you should not assume, as a parent or as a guardian or anything, you should not assume that it is not in your children's schools. You should investigate and make sure, because there's not people in our government or in our education system that are going around to make sure that it's not there.
That's right. And we have the proof that it's there.
Yes.
So we know what's going on.
Yes.
And I just think it's key. It's important. And I hear this too. People make the statement, why are people so focused on a small percentage? That's not what it's about.
Right. Well, now it's 25%.
It's about the mind. And I think that is the key, is that it's about the mind. It is about getting them to accept and getting them to promote. And it's a way to ruin their minds, and then God can't speak to their heart.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, not that he can, but it builds that barrier there.
That's right.
And so, I think it's key. We're going to continue to talk about this.
Right.
I'm going to bring it up every chance I get. I'm going to bring new information on it that we have going on across the state, because of what we did with Senate Bill 150 and the House Bill 173 that I filed this year.
Right.
Had a lot of people, a lot of parents that are very concerned that have reached out to me. And so we have to make sure education, if we could just get back to teaching kids how to read, write, and do math.
Right.
If we just focused on that, and that was all we focused on.
Yes. Yeah.
Our test scores wouldn't be the way they are.
Yeah.
And our kids would be far better off.
And we're raising a generation that's not going to be capable of performing in the workforce. They're not going to be capable of doing anything instead of a certain limited amount of jobs, because they're not capable of performing in those areas, in reading, writing, arithmetic, and science, in ways that are STEM is what they, how they, the acronym that they use now. Then they're not able to perform in those areas, and so their options for employment are going to be limited, and then their options for their future are going to be limited. And what are they going to turn to?
Right.
Statistically, they're going to turn to drugs. They're going to turn to alcohol. They're going to turn to all kinds of behaviors that are detrimental to them and to their families and to their children.
Right.
All of those behaviors then lead to family situations like domestic violence, to children that are abandoned, to children that are exploited, and it becomes a revolving door that you can't ever get rid of.
And at some point, outside of God doing the miraculous,
which he can,
it comes to a point of no return.
Yes, but we also have a responsibility.
That's right.
As God's children.
And our responsibility doesn't change. And
that's right.
Fixing to expose an addiction that I have here.
Gateway drug.
Yeah, that's right. I do have a problem.
Gateway to the real Dr. Pepper.
That's at least it's the diet. I don't know if that's better or worse, but for whatever reason, it's a problem. So now the public knows.
Aspartame, worse than marijuana, is what they say.
So I want to move on to another subject, because I had a couple people reached out to me and said we were a little bit long-winded last time, but we had a lot to unpack. And so I get that. So I want to talk about Senate Bill 241 just a little bit, just so people can be informed. Senate Bill 241 was a bill, I can't remember, it's like 48-page bill. It was a long bill that was doing a couple things. One, it was controlling how much rearranging could be done inside a Fish and Wildlife Department.
Right.
Because we've seen, especially when this governor came in, just kind of blow the department apart,
right.
firing people. And so we were working on that. We were also lowering the age for a child to be able to get a hunting license if a parent wasn't with them, you know, to be able to accommodate that. Somehow, some way, like page 38 or somewhere in the bill, there was a current law statement in there that says if you own your own property, you don't have to have fishing license or hunting license.
Yeah.
Somebody stuck in there, and I don't know who. We haven't been able to get, nobody's confessed up to it.
Yeah.
Came from the Senate side that if you have more than 5 acres, you don't have to have a hunting license or fishing license. And this doesn't affect a ton of people.
To hunt or fish on your own property.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
This doesn't affect a ton of people. It is the principle of why would we do that? And so somebody wrote a article in the newspaper, you know, blasting us for it. Rightfully so.
Yeah.
But if they ask, they can know the facts about what happened.
Okay.
Because I absolutely would not have voted for that.
Right. Yeah.
We looked through the bill when it got stuck in there. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I will tell you that we passed it right after we passed Senate Bill 150.
Yeah.
On the very last day.
Yeah.
Before we went to the veto period.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was ran through very quickly.
Right.
Where it got changed in the process, I don't know. We all pretty much missed it at some point because there were some people that weren't there or didn't vote for the bill when it came initially, but the governor vetoed it for different reasons, didn't even bring out that point, and we actually overrode the governor's veto on it.
On Senate Bill 241.
On Senate Bill 241.
Could it have been changed in that time period?
It couldn't have been.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's any way it could have been. That would be illegal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For that to happen. So I don't see how somehow it was missed. I have already drafted language to repeal that section.
Okay.
When we go back in on January, we will fix that.
Yeah.
We will make sure that we address that problem.
Yeah.
What's
the point? What's the point of?
I don't know if somebody thought they were going to pick up a little bit of money by licensing and also enforcement.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because to me, what this really would affect is somebody that's got a small little piece of ground, but they got a pond on it.
Yes. Right.
You know, or a small lake on it.
My dad has 2.5 acres and has pond access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
he would have to have a fishing license to go out.
In his own backyard, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
How it got missed, I cannot tell you. I tell you, it did come from the Senate. I know that, I mean, all of us at some point voted for this bill.
Yeah.
All the way, you know, at the end, and it came quickly. I do commit to this. Especially in the last few days of session, right before veto period, and then the very end of session. Sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose. So things are coming quickly.
And you got to focus on things.
They're changing on the fly, and we're trying to keep up with everything. We have rules in process that we can slow that down if it gets at a rate that we're not able to actually read and know what we're voting on. And we will make sure going forward, if we need to use that, we will, based on this, because somebody had to know it was there.
Right, yeah.
And somebody didn't communicate it all the way through.
And doesn't that show like how many people there are around that just want to slip in something into legislation?
Exactly right.
That benefits them or benefits somebody that they know. You know what I'm saying? And it's not like they want to present it honestly. They want to do it in a behind the,
why wouldn't you just tell everybody, hey, this is here.
Yeah.
We got it in there. If you don't support it, don't vote for it.
Yeah.
And we try to be, I try to be very transparent on any bill that I'm working on because I want people to know what's in it. I want them to know what they're voting for.
Right.
And want their support for what I have there. And we come together, we compromise, we change things. We have people that are attorneys that look at it different than somebody like me would. And they give, added benefit to helping change language. So all of that takes place. Why or how this happened, I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
But I can make this commitment. It will get fixed.
Okay.
We will get it taken care of. But I just wanted to get that out and let people understand.
Well, and
I
a
know
lot
it's
of
been a concern for a lot of people, and rightfully so.
And a lot of legislators would have either, if nobody noticed, would have just let it slide, or they would have, if somebody brought it to their attention, they would have tried to fix it without making a big deal out of it. But this is the whole point of this podcast, is to let people know, hey, we made a boo-boo here. We're going to, fix it or whatever. Or somebody made a boo-boo here.
Exactly. And that's the thing is that if it was, if it wasn't everybody, I would say, okay, you know, but it was literally the people that are the most conservative in the legislature. Yeah. All of us at some point voted for it.
Right. Yeah.
And so we'll make sure that it's corrected and get that fixed. But it's been an interesting topic because something that's that small and people's like, well, why should they care? It's about the principle.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, why would we as Republicans add fees and taxes and the ability for somebody to have more oversight by the government?
Well, and you could do a whole podcast on property rights in the U.S., and how the government has tried to encroach on those.
We actually passed a bill that dealt with surveillance on people's properties that did away with some of the laws that allowed people to be surveilled without them knowing it on their own property. So we were fighting against that. There's no way that we would have just, done that. Well, we're going to do this and then we'll offset it by, adding this. It just wasn't the case at all. And I found out, through an email somebody sent me and then I went back and looked at the bill and there it was. And so I've already sent the email to the legislative research staff and have them to have a bill drafted to file. We don't pre-file bills anymore, but I can pre-release a bill. Yeah. So when I actually get the copy of it back, I'll pre-release it because I know there's a ton of legislators out there that'll be glad to jump on board with us and say, yes, I support this. We'll easily have the votes to pass it and to fix it.
Did you just call leadership right up and talk to them about it? Or
I didn't. I've actually not heard from any of them personally, specifically about anything that happened since we were removed from our committees. Some of us were. And I've talked with some of those people, and they've really not heard much either. And so it'll be what it is. We'll just keep working. I've had the opportunity to get out in the state and speak with people, and the people of the state of Kentucky right now are as awake to what's going on politically as I have ever seen people. Faith-based groups.
That's good.
People on farms, people in cities, all across the state. People are aware of what's going on, and they're realizing the dire need that we have in the state and in our country to turn back to God and to get good leaders in our country to move us in the right direction. So my point is that we get through this election this November, and then we have another whole year of presidential elections and Senate races and House races, and so it seems like we're constantly in campaign time. And every time we come to one, I'm telling people this is the most consequential election we've ever had. And it seems like that's the case every time.
And a lot of this has started, and we can talk about that, of course, later, but a lot of it has started with the threat to democracy thing with the Democrats. And they're using this as cover to implement things, that are really a threat to democracy. And so every election that we come to, then they have implemented more and more and more policies that make it even more consequential who you vote for. We cannot have another 4 years of Andy Beshear underhandedly doing things in our education system and passing guidance and or influencing guidance in our education systems, in our prison systems. If this is happening in public schools, what's happening in youth detention centers? What do you think's happening there? They've almost effectively shut the public out of oversight of youth detention centers. What do you think's happening to those kids? They are the most vulnerable. They are the most isolated. Mm-hmm. They are the most punished. And in a lot of ways, they deserve the punishment that they're getting. But they are being put in an environment where nobody has oversight over them except the government.
Yeah.
And we know what the government does when nobody's looking.
A lot of that was exposed, and we passed a good bill this past session addressing that and addressing oversight inside of our juvenile detention centers and opening back up the Jefferson County Detention Center. There's a lot of work that's got to be done, but you're exactly right. That's exactly where all this goes, and I think helping people understand that that even with a super majority, there's so many places of appointment for regulations to be written and things that can happen with oversight that we have no oversight over. And so it's important that we have good people that appoint good people that oversee these things that on a day-to-day basis don't get looked at except by those particular groups or offices.
And in a lot of ways, that is why the vote in the primary is so important, because you need somebody that can be Andy Beshear first and foremost. And then second of all, you need somebody that can be an effective governor in appointing those people. Somebody who's not just going to get in there and loaf. Somebody who's not going to just pick their friends to be in those positions. Somebody who is an effective communicator of what they want and what the people of Kentucky want, but is also an effective delegator. Someone who can, understand people and not surround themselves with Judases.
Right.
That are going to betray them or betray the values of Kentucky.
Right.
That's what makes even this primary election so consequential, because we can even elect somebody that can defeat Andy Beshear, but if they are unable to undo all of the things that have been done, and I don't want to focus too much on the youth detention centers. I think the bill that y'all did is going to be good,
help.
But in reality,
we have much more work to do there.
Yes, but in reality, what they have turned that into for the past, I would say, at least 10 years, is almost like a laboratory for what they want to roll out in the public school system. And whenever that happens, then you have created basically the same thing that happened in Germany, the same thing that's happened in Russia. They are testing what works and what does not, what they can get past parents and what they can't. They're constantly testing these things so that they can roll them out underneath a governor, that the media is not going to look unfavorably on, not going to investigate and see what's going on. And that's where we get where we are.
And we can't
handle 4 more years of that.
And we constantly see that on the national level and at the state level, even through tragedy. If there's a mass shooting, it's an immediate test on how far will people go right now in regard to gun control.
Yes.
With COVID, immediate test on how much freedom can we take away from people. And I think I've made reference to this before. I don't think I did on the show that we did, but I read an article by Newt Gingrich that was like maybe 4 months into COVID, something, maybe not even that long.
Right.
It may have been less than that. And he said in that article, and I didn't really understand what he meant fully at the time.
Right.
It seemed like maybe it was less time than that. But he said when COVID is all over, the hardest thing to get back will not be our economy.
Yeah.
It will not be our jobs. He said it will be our freedom.
Yeah.
He said it will be the liberties that were given up will be the hardest thing that the American people would take back.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we have seen. Everything becomes a test to see how far that they can move in a direction to get us to give up that liberty. And I think it is so important when we go to the election on next Tuesday, when we engage in November, when we engage in our presidential election next year, when we vote for our city councilman, when we vote for our magistrate, when we vote for our county judge executives, our jailers, our school board, everything that we vote for, we keep that in mind and we make sure we put people there that protect liberty.
Yes.
And that allows people to do as they will.
Right.
In a controlled environment that's laid out by the Constitution.
Yes.
And people, that's where that ability to have that pursuit of happiness comes from.
Yeah. Well, and our institutions, like all of these things that you've just mentioned, they're built to work.
Right.
They're built to provide an environment of freedom for people. You know, they're not built to fail. For them to fail requires so much money and so much work and so much absolute, you know, wickedness or evil.
That's right.
They have to literally plan to try to destroy our country in order to take these things.
Yes, sir.
Or at the very least, then they have to at least plan for our country not to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. They want to change this country, and they change the definition of what America is.
Yes.
Here's one thing that we said: the great American experiment. Obama talked about this all the time. This is the great American experiment. We're constantly striving for the ideals that the founders set in place. Now, you know, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson were not thinking about trans women competing in women's sports when they were talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
You know, I could be wrong there, but probably not.
Yeah.
Considering the fact that they went to war with England over tea tax, I'm pretty sure that's probably not the case.
Exactly right.
Something that what we would call that minor, but to them it was immoral.
Right.
Right. What do you think they would think about the morality of that?
Right.
You know, but they've talked about the great American experiment, and that's not the great American experiment. The great American experiment is that the states are allowed to do as their constituents say.
Yes.
And then you put it on a stage of freedom under the federal system, and then whatever succeeds, that's what other people start doing.
That's right.
But the federal government right now is weighting the scale against the conservative states. They're trying to federalize everything. They're trying to federalize all the education. They're trying to take the power out of the state legislature's hands because they don't like what y'all do.
Yeah.
They like Andy Beshear, but they don't like what y'all do.
Right.
And so they support Andy Beshear's underhanded involvement and underhanded moves, you know.
Yeah.
They hate the legislatures and they hate what they are able to do. And don't make any mistake about that, you know, just in our minds as we're in this battle. Because we are in a battle against a bigger evil even than what we're seeing in our public schools. You know.
And I'll say this in closing because I promised somebody we wouldn't be as long this time as we were last time. And I made this statement speaking somewhere the other night. And I said that our role, my role as a legislator, is to craft policy that makes the state of Kentucky look like what we want our children and grandchildren to be raised in.
Right.
And that's done constitutionally.
Yes.
You know, it's done morally, it's done biblically primarily, but it's all of those things are involved. It's the foundation of what this nation was built on.
Yes.
But my point was this: somebody made the statement that was radical. That's a radical statement. And I said, but we have to understand that is exactly what the left has done.
Yes.
Or as I told someone today, it's not left and right, it's right and wrong.
Right, yeah.
That's exactly what those on the wrong have done.
Right.
And they have tried their best when they have power. They craft policy to make our states, our countries, our communities look like what they want it to look like.
That's right. Yeah.
We have to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yes.
We have what I call a super duper majority in the House and the Senate. Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing that we can't pass if we want to pass it.
Right.
There's no reason why that we should not be the most conservative state in the United States of America. And so we have to make sure that we fight to make sure that happens. And there's a lot that's involved in that. Debate, dissent.
Yes.
All of those things have to be allowed.
Right.
And then we have to expose bad people for being bad people.
Right.
And we have to engage the people. Everybody's got to engage in the process.
Yeah.
And if we do those things, I believe that we're going to see the state continue to move forward. Main Street, Kentucky.
Right. Yeah.
There are people that are conservative.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. And it's time for the, you know, what they call the coastal ideologies, the New York, Los Angeles ideologies that rule Hollywood and rule the media and rule.
Yeah.
It's time for that to go by the wayside. All it has done is divide our country, make our country worse, make our country more immoral, weaker on the on the international stage, weaker in domestic policy, weaker practices, weaker education. It's a failure of the coastal ideologies because it's built on do what you think is right. Right. And Main Street America and Main Street Kentucky is built on help everybody.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yes.
When the government doesn't show up, we show up.
That's right.
And that's how we've been doing for years.
That's right.
And they don't know that because they're in their own little bubble, but that's what we have been doing. It's time to take that to Frankfurt and take that to D.C.
And what most people want is the government just stay out of their life.
Exactly. Yeah.
You just stay out of their life and do
and
do what we tell them to do
Right,
because I'm one of you.
Right. Yeah.
We elect one of us to represent us.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm no different than anybody else.
Yeah.
I campaigned on principles that I'm not going to change on.
Right.
So I let people know who and what I am. And so there are certain things I'm sure I disagree with people on. I made that clear when I campaigned, but I think it's important that we all keep that mindset. We're all just another Kentuckian up there, and I'm the voice of 45,000.
Right. Yeah.
And the majority of that, and I do my best to have wisdom, to pray, have discernment, to know how to do the right thing, and stand on what's right.
Yeah.
And I think it is important to protect the ability for us to continue to do that in our government, and not let big money or lobbyists, anything else own what's going on except the people. The people. It's their house. It's their place.
Right.
And we're all just one of the 4.5 million people of Kentucky.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing special. My wife, I promise you, will tell you that. She'll tell you the truth, and I'm sure your wife keeps you humble as well.
Oh, yes. I have a little bit of self-deprecating humor, but I make enough mistakes that even if I didn't have self-deprecating humor, then if I'm going to live in reality, I can't have a high opinion of myself. That's just how it is. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun tonight. We'll try to do something again
live
next
election
week.
show next week.
Hey, let's do that. Let's see
I'm
it.
down for it, man.
Well, let's do it late, maybe next Tuesday night. Well, I don't know yet. Let me see about that. We may have to wait and do it a post-election show like Thursday or something.
Okay. We should just do live election coverage.
We'll if we can, I will, if I can make that work for my schedule on Tuesday. But if not,
like 4 hours long,
we'll do it. We'll do it at the end and try to come back and look at what's happened and get geared up. I'm excited about getting behind the candidate that comes out in all of these open elections and making sure that we get good, solid people in there.
Yes. Yeah.
Come November, the Attorney General race is open, and so we don't have anybody running against Mr. Coleman, but there is a Democrat challenger there, and so we'll talk about some of that. We'll try to keep you informed of what's going on. If you have specific things that you would like to us to talk about or topics you would like us to cover, if you'll reach out to me by email, if you have my number, that's reach out to me by that. Call my office at Frankfurt if there's something I can help with, but if you like us to cover some specific things, me and Aaron would love to do that. We love just talking about these things. We spend a lot of time talking about ideas and about Kentucky, about politics, about our future, our personal futures, the future of our children. I've got 2 grandchildren here.
Yeah.
I got 2 that are going to be here at the end of the summer. 2 more that's going to be here, Lord willing, that they have a good, safe delivery. And so I'm going to have 4 grandkids at 44.
Right.
And it's important to me.
Right. Yeah.
These things are so important.
Right.
And I think there's nothing more important that me and you can be doing.
That's right.
Than fighting to protect the hearts and the minds of our youth.
Yes.
They are the next generation that will decide which direction this nation goes, and I truly believe that.
Yeah. That's our call as men, is to protect those who can't protect themselves.
Yes, sir.
To learn from our mistakes or things that happen to us that we can't control and protect them from those things. Yeah. To not fulfill that responsibility is not just a rejection of our nature, it's a rejection of all reality.
Yeah.
Obviously the downward trend of this country started when fathers and men abdicated their responsibilities. And
huge issue
by the grace of God, then we'll stand for them.
Yeah. Huge issue. We'll talk about that sometime. I think it'd be good to think about what's going on with the lack of father figures in homes and single parent homes, and so much that we need to do in the state of Kentucky. So it's important. But anyway, thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this, and reach out to us if you have anything else that you would like for us to cover. We'll be having our own topics, but we appreciate you engaging in what's going on. And don't forget, go out next Tuesday. You can actually start Thursday and Friday and Saturday and be able to vote. And then on Election Day on Tuesday, make sure you go exercise your right, but also your responsibility, and choose a good candidate. And let's look forward to moving the state forward. Thank you. God bless you. Have a great evening. Thank you for watching the Josh Calloway podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to get as much information out as we can about what is going on in our state, in our communities, and across the country. If you will like, share, subscribe to this podcast, you can be notified as soon as a new podcast comes out. Tell your friends, tell your family about it. We would love to have more people participating and more people informed about what is taking place. Thank you, and God bless.